And the reality is Zion Williamson has not bought into his own career yet. And that is disappointing because as someone who is a fan of his, a former teammate, I know, we all know how great he can be.
Yes.
We've seen those flashes of greatness, but to do that for an extended period of time, to reach his full potential, and he's never going to get there if he doesn't buy into his own career.
In just 5 seasons, Zion Williamson's reputation has taken a drastic hit that nobody saw coming back in 2019 when he was drafted as the consensus #1 pick. In every one of his seasons in the league, he has found himself at the center of so many storylines questioning his health, his commitment to the Pelicans organization, and most recently, his focus on the game and his will to become the player that he has shown flashes of potentially becoming. One thing to note is that the criticism of Zion has actually been driven largely by the OGs of the game who are not satisfied with Zion's output so far because they believe that he can become more than he is.
Not in shape. He doesn't run. He plays the game strictly on talent.
He needs to be disciplined. Yeah. Like, you got to be disciplined when you're that.
Because Charles talked about this all the time. My talent going to get me 20. And when I start going to 20, 30, and 40, it's because I start doing certain things.
You're not going to have that longevity that we all talking about if you're not disciplined.
He's going to be somewhat successful.
But he could be special.
He could be special.
Williamson has been a very solid player so far, but not without a range of issues like his health and availability, along with others which are actually within his control, and it is for this reason that many feel like he has had a disappointing start to his career. Since Zion was drafted, the Pelicans have managed to reach the postseason twice, both times without him because he was unable to play due to injuries. By all standards, the semifinals of the in-season tournament was Zion's biggest game of his career up until that point. But with the stage set, going against the greatest player of this generation, and the same guy who was compared to coming into the draft, Zion completely disappointed. Not just statistically where he failed to put up the kind of scoring performance a generation of franchise players expected to, but defensively as well, where he looked clueless at times and appeared to be a liability on many occasions in the game.
Look at the Pelicans trying to point for Zion to find his man, not in time.
The same game that was supposed to be Zion's coming out party on a big stage ended up showing us just how much he has regressed since he first came in the league. It's even crazier when you put that performance side to side with the other times that Zion has gone head to head with LeBron, like back in his rookie season.
In many ways, it reminds me of Jordan and Kobe. I mean, they were the same position, same size. Kobe had the same game, the whole thing.
You'll remember how many people were going to be the next Michael. And then Kobe actually was. And Michael acknowledged it. Michael treated him like, yes, you're the next me. I think that this is LeBron making that statement with Zion.
In their first matchup, LeBron came out looking to make a statement, and he did. He scored a season-high 40 points, and Zion held his own with 29 points in a Lakers win at Staples. They met again just a week later, and in that game, Zion put up a career-high scoring 35 points on an efficient 12 for 16 from the field, but LeBron also put on another vintage performance with a 34-point triple-double. One play in that game that caught the eye of many was when Zion had an electric finish on one end,
Facing up and driving and smashing the rim,
which triggered a quick response from LeBron.
11 in the quarter. Wow, James from about 28 feet.
It was just one play, but just like the elite performances they put up every time they matched up against each other, it communicated one thing.
What you did last night was say to the young fella, you're a special dude. The future's yours, but now it's still mine.
Those matchups were so lit that JaVale McGee had to get a jersey swap. I mean, a jersey. It was supposed to be a matter of time before Zion quote-unquote arrived, but fast forward to their 2023 matchup and LeBron was guarding Zion like he's Ben Simmons or like his jump shot is contagious. His season stats also suggest that there's a regression in his performance, and his off-the-court track record is not the best as well, with reports about him having poor decision when it comes to his diet and his other off-the-court endeavors, which suggest that he has misaligned priorities. And Zion has even admitted to the diet struggles.
There are times when I will say that, man, that shit hard. It's hard, man. Like, you 20, 22, got a lot of money. It feel like all the money in the world, man. It is hard.
Obviously, this doesn't mean that Zion suddenly isn't the generational player we thought he was, but there's clearly a gap between the player he is and the player he can be. To understand how Zion got here, you have to hit rewind back to the days before the draft. But first, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this.
The style in which he plays puts him at risk to continue to get hurt. I have a high level of concern. Zion will probably never play 82 games in his career.
At 6'6", 285, Zion's weight was always a talking point. The burst, explosiveness, and the speed that he showed at that size was actually why many believed that he was a generational talent. But the backside of his build was the injury risk. He came into the league as the second heaviest player, only behind 7'3" Boban Marjanovic. So with that much weight at that height, everybody knew that health would be Zion's Achilles heel. Especially since he had injury issues since he was a teenager, including serious ones dating back to 2017 when he suffered a deep knee bruise in an AAU game. The issues persisted in his college days, including one instance you might know when he famously blew up a shoe and sprained his knee on national television. And those are just a few isolated events that are a part of a longer list of injuries that have plagued Zion as he has progressed through his basketball career. If you're wondering how Zion still managed to be the #1 pick in spite of his alarming injury history, it's because it was believed that he, along with the Pelicans organization, would work hard to keep him in peak shape and conditioning to prevent injuries. After all, that's what had been done at Duke. The Pelicans have worked hard on Zion's health since he first joined them, and they have even worked to change the way he walks and runs. When he first came to the NBA, he had this awkward way of walking, but the Pelicans medical staff worked hard to change that, and they did. However, injuries persisted, with Williamson getting hurt as soon as Summer League. And for a while, the Pelicans and NBA fans held on to the hope they had in Zion because of a trend we saw with him early on. Every time he got injured, he would return and remind everyone what he can do on the floor when healthy. First, there was the Summer League where he proved to be a man amongst boys, but that was followed by a meniscus tear that kept him out for the first 3 months of his rookie season. But then he had an unforgettable debut, exploding for 17 consecutive points in a 3-minute stretch, which was followed by a very promising rookie campaign. Zion's rookie season was followed by the best season of his young career, where he put up historic numbers with 27 points and 7 rebounds per game and a ridiculous 61% field goal percentage. That was the highest point per game average in league history by a 20-year-old, and his 27 points per game was the most by any player shooting over 60%. He earned an all-star spot as a starter, and it looked like the wait for Zion to live up to expectation as the franchise cornerstone was finally over. But once again, Zion's season was cut short after a finger fracture, and the year that followed was when his career took a downturn, becoming what we see today.
Zion is returning from a foot surgery, suffered at the beginning of the summer. He had a fractured right foot that was repaired surgically. His timeline should get him back on the court in time for regular season. That would be our hope and our view.
On media day of the 2021-22 season, the Pelicans GM announced that Zion has suffered a foot injury and undergone surgery in the summer. That was the first time that NBA media caught wind of the story, but it was later revealed that the Pelicans had concealed the injury due to his desire for privacy. Williamson also addressed the injury situation, saying that it came as a result of him pushing himself too hard in the offseason. Following his media day interview, many were quick to point out how Zion was visibly bigger. At the time, it made sense that he would put on some pounds since a foot injury hindered his ability to do cardio. The team also announced that they aimed to have him ready by the regular season. However, a week before the season began, the Pelicans medical staff announced that they had decided to let Zion focus and continue with his rehab in hopes of making a return at some point in the first half of the season. Some speculated that Williamson was just not in shape, which is why his return was getting pushed back. As the season progressed, Zion was forced to watch from the sidelines and the team got off to a rough start, going 3 for 16 in the first 19 games. People were wondering when Zion would be back, and it was around this time that some fans began to refer back to Williamson's visible weight gain, with images of him from the sideline and the Mountain Dew ad surfacing and spreading around social media. But around that time, the whole situation with his injury was a bit obscure, and although there were some ramblings about him not being in shape, with one report saying that he was over 315 pounds, nobody really knew the facts of the situation, and it was announced late in October that Zion was expected to return in 2 to 3 weeks, but all in all, the focus wasn't really much on his weight as it was on his outfit choices. That was until that one fateful night in November 2021 when a video of Zion doing some rehab work before a nationally televised game was taken, triggering what is now a legendary reaction from NBA Hall of Famer Charles Barkley.
Looked like me and Shaq had a baby. I quit. I gotta get. Hey, come on, man. What it look like? Like me and you had a baby. God dang.
That moment right there garnered so much attention on social media, and while it was comical to see Chuck being Chuck and Shaq cracking up to the point of shedding tears, it was also very pivotal to the nature of the public discourse about Zion's weight issues, because it was the first time that a relevant voice in the NBA media addressed the issue bluntly, calling a spade, and pointing out the issue that the Pelicans organization seemed to be sugarcoating to the public and to Zion. His return had already been postponed more than once, and the reasons that were given for it were always injury related and never about his conditioning. But in During that segment, Barkley and Kenny Smith added that the 2 to 3 weeks return timetable was unrealistic, and it turned out to be an accurate prediction. What often seems to get lost in the noise and all the laughter, however, is the sound advice that Barkley gave to Zion about the need to take care of his body.
He's already hurt. You should not get hurt when you're young. He's already had surgeries on his legs. Now he's got a broken foot. When guys get hurt, Adam, when they come back, you're trying to get in shape.
Right.
And if you're putting all that stress on your knees and your feet, you're just gonna keep getting hurt.
Now, it's important to note that for an athlete, showing up to your job out of shape is one of the worst things you can do for yourself because it communicates a lack of commitment and responsibility to your job. So when Barkley called out Zion for his weight, it wasn't body shaming per se, but it was more of a needed critique of the relationship dynamic between Zion and the Pelicans organization and how Williamson just didn't have anybody to hold him accountable for his lack of discipline.
Somebody's got to be a grown person down in that relationship and says, yo man, you got to get in shape.
It's also fitting that Charles Barkley was the one saying all of this because he was another player that Zion was compared to coming into the league, and he too had his own share of weight struggles early on in his career, which he overcame with the help of his vet and fellow Hall of Famer Moses Malone, who called him out for being quote-unquote fat and lazy. Barkley says that instance challenged him, eventually leading him to shed 50 pounds, and he points to it as the reason for his own Hall of Fame career. But his attempt to show empathy and the same tough love to Zion might have done a bit more damage than he intended to, because that famous moment officially turned Zion and his situation into the laughingstock of NBA Twitter. And as Zion's return kept getting pushed back, the jokes only got worse and worse, and it didn't help that his return was scheduled to be just a few days after Thanksgiving. Zion Williamson ran through this kitchen. Zion Williamson out 2 to 5 weeks, Thanksgiving. Social media was having a ball with the Zion memes. But what most people don't know is that the whole weight situation was actually a little blown out of proportion. This image, for example, was one of the most circulated pictures of Zion at the time, but when you compare it to the original clip, you actually see that the zoomed in picture makes him look bigger, and there were some fans who were quick to prove that Zion actually wasn't as big as advertised after running into him shortly after the initial pictures were released. His availability though was still an issue. Zion's anticipated return in the first half of the season never came. One day Shams announced that Zion would be on the court soon.
And Zion Williamson is fully cleared for all basketball activities.
And just a few days later, he made another report saying that Zion wasn't ready.
But they had to bring him all the way back. They had to dial his entire rehab back last week when he had the setback with soreness.
Many were starting to question how the Pelicans were handling the situation because this was becoming a trend, and so was public scrutiny of Zion. The whole situation was messy, so it was no surprise when news came out that there was friction between Zion and the Pelicans organization. In pure Gen Z fashion, Zion was posting subliminal pictures of him on the court at times when the team was announcing that he's not ready to make his return. Soon after, Zion decided to continue his rehab away from the team and moved it to Portland. But in the midst of all this, the team was starting to figure out an identity for themselves on the court. The first-year coach Willie Green had managed to work the team from a 3-16 start to a 22-32 record, keeping their playoff hopes alive even without Williamson on the court. They were also able to make a push for the CJ McCollum trade, which was crucial for the organization because it helped to address the lack of veteran leadership that was so glaring even from the outside. But the tension culminated in February, 2 weeks after the trade, when CJ was asked whether he had talked to Williamson, and he responded saying,
I haven't had conversations with him directly. I've spoken to some people close to him and look forward to sitting down with him sooner than that.
Following that interview, Zion found himself in hot water once again. The accusations of being uncommitted to the team and his job were looking more and more true, and this time he was hearing it from his fellow Duke brothers.
Like, this just shows a complete lack of investment in your team, in the organization, in the city. I get that he's hurt and away from the team. This is a pattern of behavior with Zion that we are seeing again and again. And look, I was his teammate. I can describe him as a detached teammate. That is an accurate statement.
Just a month later, in March of 2021, Zion was shut down for the rest of the season, putting an end to his most tumultuous season in which he didn't even set foot on the court. But he still wanted to play, and he was hinting that he was able to do so with posts on social media. Even without him though, the Pelicans were able to make the playoffs, and while they exited in the first round, there was hope for the future, especially if number one was to stay with the organization. There were so many speculations about him potentially requesting a trade, but both the team and Zion denied those rumors, and they both showed mutual interest by committing to a long-term 5-year, $193 million deal. This was the dream for any Pelicans fan. The team finally looked like a playoff team with a good balance of vets and young guys, an elite guard and 2 elite forwards, and best of all, Zion was about to return healthy with no plans of departing from the team. And Williamson showed up and delivered. 24 games into the season, the Pelicans were number 1 in the West, and while there were some questions about how deep of a run they could make in the playoffs, there was no questioning that they were legit in the regular season. And Zion was actually in much better shape until he suffered a hamstring injury, sidelining him for the rest of the regular season again. This hurt the Pelicans because by the time March rolled around, they had fallen to the 12th spot, and while health was generally an issue for them, the Zion injury was very significant to the team's struggles because they had been able to sustain a top 3 position with missing personnel prior to the Zion injury. They found themselves in play-in contention, and while Zion was quote-unquote fine physically, he was not 100% healthy, so he decided to sit out the game. The Pelicans lost the play-in game, bringing their season to an end. At that point, it was clear that the Zion experience was just a cyclical trend. He would show us how good he is, then he would get hurt. People would question if he's that guy and if his body can handle the load. And then he'd remind us again that he's a generational talent, but only for a short time. And then the cycle would go on and on. It was getting old, and fans were pointing this out every time off-season pictures of a slimmer Zion surfaced. The health issues have become a part of Zion's identity, but what happened after that season proved the other concerns that people had about his lack of focus and care for the game. That, of course, is all the stuff about his involvement with adult stars, including one who dragged Zion through the mud on social media, making a fool of him and herself in the process.
Dallas. Why Dallas?
Why Dallas, bro? Why Dallas, bro?
Dallas is amazing.
This led to old and recent videos of Zion surfacing, and if the clips emphasized anything, it's that Zion is probably not as focused on the game, which is a thing that has now become a part of his reputation. Zion is now viewed as a young star with potential to become the best player in the league, but because of different issues, including many of which are actually in his control, he at times looks like the 3rd best player in a team that's looking at him to be the main guy. All of this because right now, he seems to be riding the wave of talent instead of committing himself to achieving his full potential. I want to hear from you guys though. Do you think that Zion has been a disappointment so far, or are we being too hard on him? Once again, be sure to like and subscribe, but until next time, peace.